Well, today is September 10th, 2012. Today we are interviewing another individual who has been very influential in the direction of the Lakewood Country Club, Dave Lauderback. And David, we'll just start out and ask you a pertinent question. Where were you born? And we'll go from there. Dave?
Well, good morning, Vic. Dave. I was born in Cincinnati, Ohio, 1938. So I'll be 74 in another month. And I went to high school there and left the city when I went to Ohio State University when I was 18 years old. And never to return, actually. My parents left the city shortly after I went to Ohio State, and they moved to Cleveland. And so Cleveland became my second home while I was in college. I graduated from Ohio State University in 1963. By then I was married to Connie Clark of Fairview Park, Ohio, who is my wife still, my only one. And
the two of you meet?
We met through her younger sisters, or through our younger sisters. They were both classmates at Fairview High School, and they fixed us up one holiday, seeing the perfect match, and we were very lucky to have it blossom. And we were married in 1961. And should anybody be doing any counting, our first son was born in 1963. So, or actually, 64. So, just in time to keep me out of the military after having graduated from. He's born in '63, and having graduated, now I was eligible for the draft. And circumstances worked so that for those of us between wars, they kept expanding the draft requirements, giving deferments to people with children and college degrees, and so on and so forth. And I escaped Vietnam for that reason. And maybe I'd spent some time in the military in the Ohio National Guard, but that's my only military experience, is the Ohio National Guard. So I began a business career in Cleveland in 1963 after graduating, and my career aspirations were always to get into the advertising business. The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit was a popular movie at some point in my influential life, or in my.
To be one of those madmen.
I wanted to be a madman, yeah. And interestingly, the business was not too different from what is portrayed in the TV. Except for drinking on the job and carousing were more private in those days. Yes. But it was a pressure-cooked business driven by get the next new client every day of your life. So I spent the earlier part of my career, the first 12, 13 years, at an agency in Cleveland. Bounced to a couple of jobs in marketing and back to the agency business for the first 20 years of my life. And at some point in there, I was introduced to the consulting professions. It was actually, I was interviewing for a job at Carr Liggett Advertising, and Hal Shoup, who was the president, put all of his new hirees through an interview process with a psychologist in Lakewood. And somewhere through the end of the interview, he said, you know, your profile is very unusual, and you ought to find happiness, you need to be in the consulting ranks. And interestingly, advertising in the early days was a lot about consulting. And so I spent many years consulting people without knowing it, or consulting for people. So as things matured, I went to work in the consulting arena in human resources, doing executive search work for corporations. Started first with a firm by the name of Korn Ferry International, where I spent 8 years, from about 1984 until 89, something like that. And from there I was recruited by A.T. Kearney, a management consulting firm, a global company, who had an executive search division, and I went to work in that business, first to head up their financial services practice and eventually to run the Cleveland office and to run a national and global practice in boards of directors executive search. I spent the rest of my career there, eventually moving to the Miami office during the recession as it hit Cleveland in the early part of this past decade. And I relocated to Florida, where I now have my home, my second home, and we still maintain a residence here in Avon Lake, Ohio, having spent, our family grew up in Bay Village, and we spent 40 years in Bay Village, and I served there on the school board and other activities in that community. So Avon Lake is our retirement community in Cleveland area, and Bonita Springs, Florida is our residence in Florida, where we spend 7 months a year, 5 up here. I've been a member of Lakewood Country Club since 1971. This would be, therefore, my 42nd year as a member, and I've seen a lot of change in the club over those years, but also a lot of sameness. Lakewood has never been a capital-rich country club, that's for sure. It has always been on the edge of its ability to reinvest in itself, and nothing has changed in that regard. So it's taken a lot of hard work by literally a small core of people to keep it alive and to keep it healthy and to keep its culture alive for all of these years. I joined Lakewood as a junior member back then, and I think the initiation fee was $4,000, and they let me spread it over 4 years. So dues were probably in the neighborhood of $300 a month, if my memory serves me correctly. And each increase, of course, was faced with agony by everybody who grew up in that era. 70s were very, very times of meager discretionary dollars in most households. And I'll never forget being interviewed by Ken Stouffer and somebody else who came to our little house in Bay Village, which was a new house, and we were quite proud of it, 2-story with 3-4 bedrooms. And Ken looked at me, he looked at Connie, and he said, "Now you know something to the effect that this is a commitment. Like, this costs money. This isn't a free ride." So I assured Ken that not only was it okay, but my company was paying for it, so he needn't worry about it. And that was a difference in those days. You could get your employers to support you in these country club endeavors before Bill Clinton changed the tax laws. And so country club living was a lot different. Many people were in corporations. There were a lot of good connections in country clubs for people in the advertising business or in consulting. It has evolved to a culture of really, I think today, more individuals, entrepreneurs, people who maybe not even go to offices anymore. They work from their homes, they work remotely, they work in various different ways. So that changes the culture a great deal. It seems that, for instance, Lakewood has evolved. We have, it seems, many members now without families, at least the younger set, and they enjoy the country club life for the golf primarily. We still have many families who enjoy the full social spectrum. But in the early days, clubs provided a place for people to really enjoy each other and their company. They were social groups, and people were nurtured into believing and having values of the club. and loyalty and tradition were a great part of what Lakewood Country Club was about in the early days. Some of my earlier mentors included Don Burney, who was head of long-range planning when I was there, who actually is responsible for the current footprint of Lakewood Country Club, and the excess land that we're now attempting to sell to pay for expansion was really assembled by Don over a period of 10 years with great diligence and care, and some help from outside experts who guided him and helped him assemble the current footprint. It was a very, very great investment of energy and time of people. A lot of the development of the club was horse trading. He actually would barter one piece of land for another without cash ever changing hands, and he eventually got a very good boundary for the club. The golf course when I first joined was in a state of I think they had a pythium outbreak the summer before I joined, and there was no grass on the slope going up number 14 green. It was kind of a mess. And Chuck Lott was not all that experienced in those days, and the course was not in great shape. His solution remained he got some consulting help from a fellow who, and I've heard this directly, so this isn't hearsay. I've heard it from the consultant who worked with him. The consultant who ended up advising him was formerly a high school maintenance guy who worked at the little golf course in North Olmsted called the North Olmsted Golf Course, which was across from Springvale. And he said the owner there said, now you keep the course wet. We want it green when these people come out all summer long. That's what they come out here for, is to see green grass. And if you keep it wet, they'll keep coming back. So if you ever played the North Olmsted Golf Course, you'll know very well what I'm talking about. It was always green, it was always growing, and it was always wet. But people kept coming back. So this fellow took his knowledge that he gained. He eventually became the superintendent at Canterbury, and he used to water the hell out of that place too. And when he got fired there, he became a consultant, which is not unusual. And Chuck was one of his clients, and Chuck learned from this master that to keep the golf course going, you have to keep it green. And the wet golf course ultimately led to Chuck's demise, and he was very gracefully ushered out when he was in his 60s after 30 or some years of employment. Jerry Boykin was the pro when I first joined the club, and Jerry's a Louisiana boy, and the old style pro. He worked very hard at Lakewood and did not make a lot of money, and eventually fell on his own sword there too for various reasons. But Jerry was a good friend and taught me a little bit how to play golf. And when I joined the club, I couldn't keep the ball on any fairway. I used to hit it over trees, and I could hit it a long way, but I wasn't exactly sure where. And over a year or so, Jerry was able to get my handicap down to somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 or 16, and occasionally I'd have a good round. And because I was young and because I could hit it a long way, people thought I was a sandbagger. Little did they know that I would have loved to have had a handicap at 0, and I worked very hard to get it down to what it is today, which is still about what I always played to. And I've learned a lot about the game, but in those 40-some years. But there are lots of good memories about Jerry, and that I could share with others, but this is not the place. But he was a good teacher and taught me a lot of interesting little things about the grip, which is still the most fundamental and important part of the game. The social life at Lakewood when I was there was, as a young man, began, there were some stag events that many of the members would remember. And of course, we were introducing our families at that time to the club, and there was a swimming pool, and the kids were coming along and swimming and doing that and participating in those events more or less as we have them today. So that part of the club's tradition has stayed intact. In fact, the swim team and the swimming pool and the new swimming pool is a great addition. And it's in the wrong place, but it's a great addition to the club. And the swim team has prospered in recent years under some good coaching and with some good leadership over there. The swimming pool and the swim team work very well. I digress into that part of it, but it is a very important attraction for families, and it should be maintained at all costs if you want to maintain a country club at Lakewood, or if we wish to. But the